There are those who are beloved amongst most fans in the NBA, even outside of their own fan base. Guys like Giannis, Steph Curry, Damian Lillard, or even former players like Tim Duncan and Dirk Nowitzki. And then there are those that are viewed more as villains and players fans love to hate, historically speaking. Guys like Bill Laimbeer, Dennis Rodman, Ron Artest, to currently in the NBA, guys like Draymond Green, Kyrie Irving, Chris Paul, even though I don't really understand that last one. But more recently, a new contender has emerged as the most hated player in the NBA due to some of his recent antics, trash talking, and dirty plays, and that's the Memphis Grizzlies' Dillon Brooks. But what exactly has led to this point for how Brooks became the most hated player in the NBA for a guy who just a year or two ago seemed to be a pretty pleasant player, not stirring up a lot of drama, just a tough, fierce competitor who would give it his all on the court? Well, that's what we'll be exploring in this video. If you're new to the channel and you enjoy this type of content, then be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a video, and in return, I'll be putting out more NBA content like this all season long. Now, the story of Dillon Brooks and how he made his way into the NBA is a unique one in the sense that he wasn't really heavily recruited out of high school, played 3 years at Oregon, and in his freshman year was solid for the Ducks, but nothing that would lead most scouts to think that this guy had any kind of NBA potential. Then, he broke out in his sophomore season, was showing up as one of the best two-way players on the team, continued to get better in his junior season where he became more efficient on offense, and despite the fact that most mock drafts had him projected to go in the second round, potentially even going undrafted, he decided to declare for the NBA draft and foregoing his senior season at Oregon. Sure enough, Brooks went midway through the second round, being selected 45th overall by the Houston Rockets, but was traded on draft night to the Memphis Grizzlies for a future second round pick. And say what you will about Dillon Brooks, obviously he's not a star player in this league, he's not really the embodiment of efficiency in the NBA, some might even say that he's an empty stats player. It's his hustle and effort that gets him the playing time. But either way, you can't deny that Brooks was a steal of a pick considering how late he went in the draft and the fact that a lot of players drafted in that range are not even in the NBA anymore. But either way, Dillon Brooks impressed in his rookie season, actually contributing and impacting the court, playing in all 82 games in his rookie year when it was thought he might actually spend most of his time in the G League that season. Had his struggles with injuries that sidelined him for most of his sophomore year, but then came back and really broke out in his third season, being a legitimate third and fourth scoring option for the Grizzlies, and continues to be so to this day for that team. But this season, something has been setting Brooks off that players and fans haven't been taking too kindly to, and it really started last season in the playoffs, when the Grizzlies lost to the Golden State Warriors in the second round after having an incredible regular season where they finished second in the Western Conference. Now, I'm sure most remember that in Game 3 of that series, the series tied up 1-1. Jordan Poole made an attempt to steal the ball away from Ja Morant, grabbing his knee in the process, which injured Ja, and he would not return for the rest of that series. And of course, throughout that series, especially towards the end, the Warriors were super cocky, as they usually are, and they kind of made it known even after winning that series and letting the Grizzlies hear about it in various shots and digs at players on social media. Now, who knows what would have happened had Ja played out the rest of that series. I personally think the Warriors were still going to win that series anyway, but there are some fans who feel the Grizzlies would have taken that series had Morant not gotten hurt. But be all of that as it may, something struck a nerve with Dillon Brooks, and a lot of it also has to do with the fact that really throughout Brooks' life as a basketball player, he's always played with this chip on his shoulder for not being seen as good enough. Fast forward to this season, the Grizzlies, while maybe not at the same level as we saw last season when they were just running through the league, but they're still one of the best teams in the NBA, and most would consider them to be title contenders when they're fully healthy. Then, of course, closer to the start of this season, you saw the Grizzlies talking a lot of trash on the court, acting overly confident and cocky when they were playing. You saw players saying they were the most hated team in the NBA, Ja Morant saying he isn't worried about anyone in the West, which I honestly would have never thought to consider the Grizzlies to be the most hated team in the NBA until they started making all these claims about it. Then the dirty plays started happening, which, let me be clear, were there before, but they were becoming more frequent and more apparent, and it starts with Dillon Brooks, where you're seeing this common theme of him getting into these altercations where he's clearly being the aggressor and then tries to act like he hasn't done anything wrong after the fact. Kind of like Grayson Allen, but to an even worse degree because you're seeing it happen more often. Donovan Mitchell, who got into an altercation with Dillon Brooks after Brooks hit him below the waist in what appeared to be a move that was not an attempt to go for the ball. Mitchell stated that that's just who Brooks is. We've seen it with him a bunch in this league. Since that scuffle, there have been multiple occasions of Brooks committing hard fouls, dirty plays that could pass off as being unintentional, so he's able to get away with it. And as Donovan Mitchell has said, this isn't anything new with Brooks. He's been doing this with him and with other guys throughout the league. It's something that's been brewing for years, and it's getting to a boiling point. But here's where things turn for me and my view on Dillon Brooks, because as much as I find the dirty plays annoying, I think there's no place in the league for plays where you try to put another player at risk of a potential injury. But at the same time, I also get it. It's part of the game. Some guys play like that. Some guys play hard and more physical, something I do actually like when it's done right. But what changed things for me, and I think for a lot of fans as well, that quickly made Dillon Brooks the most hated player in the NBA, was in a game against the Heat in Miami. Brooks was going after a loose ball, headed out of bounds. He crashed into the cameraman, which that happens, nothing new there. But then Brooks, instead of just regaining his balance, pushes off on the cameraman, sending him backwards with the camera falling on top of him. The cameraman was injured on this play, and at least at the time of this recording, remains under evaluation. Now, Brooks was fined $35,000 for this incident. Brooks did add that it was not his intention to hurt him in any way possible. He added he's not that type of person. Yeah. I mean, should we really be giving this guy the benefit of a doubt after some of the on-court antics we've seen from him? And I don't know how you can't watch that video and think that this was just an accidental push-off, using his momentum of his fall into the stands to push off on the cameraman. No, this was clearly a little added shove with the way his arm is extended and follows through after it. And look, normally when stuff like this happens on the court, yes, it's annoying. It's frustrating to see players do cheap shots in the game. But to do something like this, a guy who's just trying to do his job, trying to make a living, and an injury like this keeps him out of work? No, you can't sit there and stand by this. And that fine from the league was incredibly weak when we all know that if that was a fan that he did that to, there would have been much bigger repercussions for Dillon Brooks. Of course, all this doesn't include Brooks getting into it with Shannon Sharpe sitting courtside at the Lakers game telling him to sit the F down, or more recently getting into it with Klay Thompson after the Grizzlies beat up on the Warriors pretty bad the other day. Thompson, of course, had to remind him of his 4 rings while the Grizzlies have 0 as a franchise. The ultimate silencer in any form of trash talking. I don't know, I don't get it. It's almost like the guy is enjoying being the villain in the NBA and disliked by players and fans. I guess it works for some. Guys like Dennis Rodman thrived being the bad guy, although Brooks is nothing in terms of being on the same level as Dennis Rodman. But as long as Brooks keeps up this behavior, continues with these antics and shenanigans, he will remain the most hated player in the NBA. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.